Hey everyone, David Jelks here, and I want to take you through what I call the core orientation warm-up. And again, this is very specifically designed to get your body ready to take on the rigors of exercise or sport, no matter what it is that you do, based on the idea that your body becomes the sum total of all its behavior. And if I look at what I was doing this morning, so I slept for roughly 6 to 8 hours. I wandered around, made a coffee, I sat down on my computer, I wrote out some workouts, and so basically I was in a flex position from like 11:30 last night till approximately 10:30 this morning. So my body is in this forward flexion, so my hip flexors are probably fairly short, my hamstrings are probably a little bit tight, so my body is really kind of incongruent, right? There's some tight pieces, weak pieces. And there's a term called stratification syndrome, which just means I have layers of tight and then weak and then tight muscles all up and down my body. So I professionally think that it would be a good idea to clean that up before I start loading exercise on top of it. Because ideally, every exercise that you do should be a core exercise. Now, there's things that we do very specifically, like I'll show you now, that are very focused, core orientated. But if I'm doing a deadlift or a squat or a hang clean or a sprint or a box jump, that really should be a core exercise, meaning that my core should be awake and highly stimulated prior to me doing that activity. So I've got a nice stable spine. I've got a really highly active and congruent muscular system, so that when I'm training, I'm going to reduce the risk of injury, but also present myself in exercise, present myself to this various types of training with a really congruent nervous system. So let me shut up and I'll get right into it here. So when we think about our core, we often think about our external muscles, like our trunk, right? Our trunk muscles, our hip muscles, right? All the muscles around the abdomen, and of course that's kind of the middle of the body. So that makes sense, kind of the core. But if you think about when you core an apple, do you core an apple in the front or the back, or do you core the apple straight down the middle? Well, the answer is you core it down the middle. So let's think about core in the beginning stages, and as we set these exercises up, that it comes from the base of our pelvis or our pelvic floor, working its way up and down the spine through a series of muscles called multifidus. And that's kind of our deep intrinsic core. So when our pelvic floor contracts, it actually pulls our spine down through the co-contraction of these multifidus muscle fibers. So if we can activate that first and warm up that piece first and then build upon that and be really consistent in that thought and action, then our nervous system will actually start tuning all behavior to that. So wouldn't it be great to know that when you go to take a stride or you go to jump, that your core muscles intrinsically fire, stabilize the kinesthetic forces or the energies that your body's having to contend with through the rigors of exercise and sport, that your body's managing them properly and that you're not guessing. And so many athletes and weekend warriors, fitness participants, really are guessing on how their body's loading it. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first exercise I want you guys to do is a simple pelvic tilt. Now, the way I look at exercise is that I don't look at an exercise, let's say, well, doing a pelvic tilt, and just doing the exercise without actually first thinking the muscles into play. So what I'd like you to do is think about the muscles of your bladder. Right, so you tighten your bladder muscles. Your bladder muscles will, of course, attach to the base of to the pubic arch. And think about when I tighten the bladder muscles, that lower belly, the TVA tends to flatten. And I want to think about my abdominal wall pulling my pelvis forward via the bladder. Right, so tighten my bladder muscles and then pull through, and I get this slight rotation. So I'm not doing pelvic tilt, I'm actually flexing muscles that tilt the pelvis. And that's very different, right? It's a very, very different way to look at it. And of course, it actually feels quite different when you go through the motion. So tighten the muscles around the bladder and then pull through and then pull through. So I get that little rotation. It's a very small movement, right? So it's not very dramatic. I don't feel my thighs, I don't feel my hamstrings, I don't feel any other muscles trying to get involved. Not feeling it in my neck, which often people do, funny enough. Now, so if I tighten the muscles around the bladder and pull through, of course, I'm going to get that slight rotation, so I am getting a pelvic tilt. Secondly to that, if you want to also contract the rectal muscles again, so we're tightening the entire pelvic floor, and we'll feel that rotation be created a little bit stronger now. So pull through and tighten, pull through and tighten, pull through and tighten. Now I feel a little bit of a stronger rotation and really feel my lower back being pressed down. But again, I'm not doing a pelvic tilt. I'm flexing the muscles that tilt the pelvis, right? So I'm very conscious about what muscles am I using to actually accommodate this movement. Now, if we do about 8 repetitions of that, getting a good sense of it, making sure not to tighten your neck and shoulders, right? Because I find myself, if I'm not careful, right? I feel my neck kind of getting involved, and I'm making facial expressions of tightening my jawline. I don't want this involved with this, right? So again, 8 repetitions at a time, and then you stop, relax, right? Relax for 15 seconds, do it again, right? Make sure you have control of it, right? And you really have to think about it. And I want to think about where it is, right? I want to think about the base of my pelvis. I want to feel the contraction, then I want to do the movement. So I want to think, feel, then do. I want to think, feel, then do. And set it up so that it's a conscious thing. Don't be listening to music. Don't be talking to somebody else. Just think about the exercise. So you're building a brand new set of associations in your brain, and you're building a brand new powerful map of movement inside your body, right? Thinking is really important, right? So after doing about 8 repetitions, 2 to 3 sets, you feel like it's warmed up, you feel like you've got some good conscious control over the part of your anatomy. Secondly, second exercise is, again, tighten your pelvic floor. Again, do the pelvic tilt. Now keep it there, making sure that it's not so aggressive you can't breathe, right? So it's just a moderate contraction. Now I'm going to take my left foot, focusing on my core now, right? Knowing where my core is, around my sacrum, right? My base of my spine here. I'm going to brace and brace. Brace and brace. Lift up from here, control down from here. Lower back is to the floor the entire time, right? Control, 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 control. Now, just for an experience sake, what I'd like you to do is don't worry about this. Relax the pelvic floor. Lift the left leg independently, right? Do that 3 or 4 times. Now hear the sound. Can you hear my foot drop? What ends up happening is I land very heavy when I'm not focused on drawing from my core. So again, pull through, do your pelvic tilt, pull on the pelvic floor, make sure you get that slight rotation, lower back press to the floor, and go through that motion using your core to control it. And again, same repetition scheme. We'll do about 8 repetitions on one side, and then from the other side we'll do the same thing. Pelvic tilt, right? Tightening the muscles that tilt the pelvis, anchored in place, and control, and control, and control, right? Pretty simple stuff. Piece of cake, right? And again, if you feel like you feel that if your shins are involved, because sometimes your toe will want to flex, so this this anterior portion of your tibialis will want to activate, or you feel your hip flexors, stop, reset, start again. If you find yourself tightening your jawline, stop, reset, and start again. You want a really clean movement, right? So again, we have a pelvic tilt for 2 to 3 sets of 8 repetitions. We have our left heel lift, again, for about 8 repetitions. Same thing for the right. We'll go back 2 to 3 sets. And the key thing is, think about what you feel. Think it into action. Don't be talking to the person next to you. Go inside. Don't be listening to music. Just shut it all down. So all you focus on is this really clean control, nice solid here. Control, 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 control. All right. Now let's go into the upper body. And you're going to take, I have an 8-pound dumbbell. You can use whatever weight. It's very light weight, right? So nothing really heavy. And I'm going to bring my shoulder blades back to against the mat. So my chest is pushed up. And then I'm going to make sure, now by pulling my shoulders back, automatically I feel my lower back want to arch. I want to tuck my lower back down by tightening my pelvic floor. And I won't get a completely flat press to the floor. So it doesn't mean my lower back already has a natural curvature to it, so I'm not worried about it not being totally flat, but I do want to feel that pelvic tilt so my lower back is stiff and solid, right? Especially in this exercise. So from here, I want to imagine that there's a line running from the end of the dumbbell or my wrist down to my pubic bone, right? So it's like a fisherman's reel. So I've got some fishing line attached from here to here, and I'm using my core to control the movement overhead. I have to take it all the way to the floor. Halfway is fine. And then I want to focus on here, bringing it back and controlling it up, controlling the downward phase, controlling the upward phase. And again, just for comparison's sake, so you know what the difference is, relax your core, right? Relax this, focus on the arm by itself. And you're going to find an amazing difference, such an amazing difference. For something that's seemingly so simple, it's so profound, so profoundly different,
right? And again, same idea. We're going to do 8 repetitions on one side, pelvic tilt. Go back about halfway, using your core, focusing on your core to control the movement of the arm via the shoulder. Shut off your core just so you get the feeling of what it's like not to have that kind of control. It's actually quite amazingly different. So again, 8 repetitions, pelvic tilt. We have our heel lifts, we have overhead arm extensions, 2 to 3 sets of each. And again, think, feel, do each and every time. All right, now we're going to go through and we're going to do a bridge. So we're going to bring our glutes into play. And for our glutes, of course, we're going to focus on doing just a standard bridge, which is a hip lift. Again, tighten to the pelvic floor, drive through the heels. I'm going to push through my heels. And when I come up, I'm actually not going to go vertical. I'm not thinking about going vertical because your hips are actually attached like this. So I'm bringing my hips in and squeezing in and up. Right? So the top of the motion, what I feel, my glutes are active. I feel, of course, a little bit of a stretch here because my hip flexor is a little bit tight this morning. And then when I come down, I'm going to bring my spine down, right? So one vertebrae at a time, bringing my upper back down, down in control. Tighten the pelvic floor, right? So I'm strong core muscles, and then I'm going to squeeze in and up. I'm not just pushing up, I'm squeezing in and up, driving off my heels, and then holding it up here for a couple seconds, and then bring it down via the upper back, one spinal piece at a time, right? Push to the heels, squeeze up, and then come down under control. So again, for all these exercises, we're going to do, again, 2 to 3 sets of 8, but think, feel, do each and every time. And as we do that, what the brain will start experiencing is that it'll start recognizing that every time you do that movement, your intention or your behavior is you tighten your pelvic floor first, and the brain will start to recognize that pattern. And what will happen is that will become innate. That'll become an innate part of your behavior, which is what you want. So that's the first part of your warm-up, right? So again, we have pelvic floor warm-ups and pelvic tilts. We have heel lifts, overhead arm extensions, and we have our bridges. Now, I'm going to look at a little bit of rotational work that you can also add, which I think is really, really important to get your body prepared, again, for various forms of exercise and sport to come. Okay, everyone, here's the second part of the warm-up. And of course, the first one's, of course, we did on the ground, which is really designed to wake this and warm this part up. Now, there's another part of course, human movement is called rotation. And of course, we have ball and socket joints of the hips, and we have ball and socket joints of the shoulder. And again, it's really, really crucial to warm these things up powerfully, right? Because we want control of these joints before we go on into any form of training. And for every degree of motion, which means every degree of motion I have inside my shoulder or I have inside my hip, I want a degree of control. And our daily lives simply do not demand that from us. And I think a lot of the injuries in I think a lot of the injuries that we encounter within our hips and shoulders are kind of unnecessary. Other than direct trauma, I think a lot of the injuries are just simply the cause. A lot of the injuries we encounter perhaps day to day, either in sport or just day-to-day life, of course, I think a lot of them are caused by the joints not being very intelligent. Our shoulder doesn't know how to contend with this powerfully because we don't do it very often. Our hips don't know what to do with these kind of motions, these kind of ranges, because it's never been there before or not enough to actually make a difference. So we're actually going to go through that part this morning. All right. So I've got a TheraBand here, and if you're training in a gym, of course, you have the access to the cable system. And we're going to do some trunk rotation. And the most important part of the exercise is not the TheraBand or the cable, the weight that may be attached to it. The exercise is here in my hip. Now that we're warmed up to our spine is not going to move. So it's rigid. So I pull it to the pelvic floor. I have a low center of gravity, so my knees are soft, my core is tight, my shoulders are back and down. Now I'm going to focus on rotation. So the rotation is this side, this is my right hip. So the rotation is off this right foot, and I'm going to bring my right hip around about 45 degrees. Now, the tendency in this exercise is for people to lean into it. This is not a golf swing, right? This is just, again, just a general warm-up for the rotation of the hip. And I want you to focus on that turn here, right? So I'm actually rotating my heel. I'm bringing my hip bone inward, and then I'm going to rotate my heel out about 45 degrees. And it's just a little movement here, right? So it's one and in, turn and in. Now, years ago, we used to call it stubbing at the cigarette.
course, a really bad analogy for fitness, but it was the idea, I think it was from boxing, back in the boxing days. You put your foot down and you're just going to stub it out, right? So maybe we'll use a different one. But the idea is getting that rotation, and I want to turn without actually rotating my spine a whole lot, right? So I don't want to be twisting my spine, and the movement is not led by my shoulder. I'm not leaning with my shoulder, I'm just turning my hip. And what I feel is my glutes are active and my core muscles are still on, and again, I'm getting to that 45 degrees of rotation. Add the cable to it, or the TheraBand, depending on what you have. If you're doing this at home, perhaps. You have a TheraBand attached to something heavy, preferably not a lamp. And we're going to go off this hip. And when I turn, when I rotate through, I want to make sure that the cable is still lined up to my chest. I'm not starting with the cable of TheraBand because it actually starts twisting my spine out of alignment. I'm going to start off my hips, so really low center of gravity, strong core. Think about that push off the hips, and then turn, still lined up to my sternum, and turn and turn and turn and turn, right? So again, I got that great rotation. You think about from tennis, right, to throwing a punch, but I want the ability to turn. And if you're an athlete, of course, you think about multi-directional patterns. And if I'm here and I want to turn off to the side, I want this really powerful hip to be able to rotate properly, so I get all this acceleration from that triple extension from my ankle to my knee to my hip, to be able to turn powerfully and get my glutes to propel me forward, right? And again, it's just something that I see when so many individuals and athletes, they're way too weak in the hips and the timing is all off. So again, simple exercise like this will really start to orientate you. Now with the cable, of course, we went from crossbody here. You can also use a higher cable, right? So my recommendation is go from midline to the higher position. If I'm pulling from up here, again, I'm pulling down across the body, the same rotation. Right? So I'm making sure that it's lined up to my sternum, pulling it through, coming down here. So it's top to bottom, and I do the same thing from the bottom, coming off the bottom cable, and from here, I'm turning through, and it's the same thing, still lined up to my chest. I never lead with the shoulder, and I never lead with the cable. I always lead with the hip. So knees soft, core tight, pull up in the pelvic floor gently. Again, you don't have to squeeze your bladder so hard like if you're going to prolapse it. We're not trying to turn coal into diamond here, right? We're just trying to get a little bit of tension here so the brain goes, okay, they turned that muscle on first, what next? Let's bring all the energy back down to here, right? So knees soft, core tight, good shoulder stability, shoulders back and down, and rotate through. All right, so lastly, it comes to the last part we're going to look at. Now, of course, very quickly, in case you didn't understand this, what you do for one side, you do for the other, right? So if you do it for the right, if you go from right to left, you go from left to right. Repetitional scheme, again, we're only looking at, we're doing 2 to 3 sets of 10 to 15 repetitions this time around. I really want to get that rotation in, right, inside each hip, and really make sure that that's highly functional. And again, this whole workout warm-up doesn't take that long. It takes me a little longer to explain it, but for you to actually do it, you're probably going to look at about 15 minutes, right? So 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes on treadmill, 10 to 15 minutes here doing this work. And again, it's really, really important because again, it sets you up powerfully for your workouts. All right, last exercise here. Now we're going to focus on the shoulder girdle. And of course, we're talking about the muscles in around the inside the shoulder joint here, part of the rotator cuff, and the muscles behind you. Because what we're looking for is that no matter where I move my shoulder, I want really good stability, right? I want really good control of the shoulder joint. And what we can do here is, I'm going to throw this up here. All right. And we're going to do a couple different exercises, but we're going to do one big one here. And this is actually good for the whole spine. I'm going to move it a little bit further forward here. There we go. And using cables or TheraBands. And we're going to do a pull through. So we're going to start here with the arms extended, knees soft, core tight. The rolls are always the same, shoulders back and down. And I'm going to pull all the way through here, right down to my hip, right? The shoulders locked in place, stay in control all the way through, right, all the way through. And what I'm doing is I'm rotating the shoulder joint, keeping the muscles, the posterior muscles of my body in control, and I'm trying to maintain great shoulder stability. I'm just teaching my shoulders what to do and taking them through a rotational sequence, right? So from here, stick your bum out. If it feels socially awkward, you're probably doing it right. And pull through, and pull through, and pull through. And again, we're going to do about 15 repetitions. So at the bottom here, my core is active, my neck is free, my shoulders are back and down, right? So I'm maintaining really great posture here, right? Really getting those shoulders, and of course my rhomboids, my mid traps, lower traps, right? My extensors of my spine. I got so much great stuff going on here. I really want to make sure that that's, again, that I've got a really active body. And then I'm going to put my exercise on that, right? It makes such a crucial difference, you have no idea. All right, now lastly, I know this seems like a lot, but I assure you it's exceptionally good for you. Again, using cables or TheraBands, we're going to do some external rotation. And it's not just the typical kind of rotator cuff exercise. We're going to do a full arm extension. So, and again, we can do it from the floor up, do it from the midline across, and do it from the top and down. And I recommend doing all three, right? Again, it doesn't take very long. It only takes a couple minutes to go through each of these little routines. And again, 15 minutes, you should be able to get all of it done. All right. So again, so do an external rotation. Again, you want to think about in the sequence of course, knee soft, core tight, shoulders where? Well, shoulders back and down. And if I'm starting across the body, what I'm thinking about here is not the hand or the cable. What I'm thinking about is bringing my left shoulder blade into my spine and in place, right? I lead with my left shoulder blade, pulling it through here. And so I'm not elevated, my neck is completely free to move. I still have, my knees are soft, my core is still tight. And now I feel my left shoulder blade against my spine, right? So basically we're just sliding the left shoulder blade in towards the spine, in towards the spine, and in towards the spine, right? So again, I'm taking the shoulder joint and I'm rotating it, and I'm rotating it under control, under control. Now, same thing goes from the outside. If I'm doing the opposite motion, and I'll just do it standing facing you, of course. So again, I want to do the internal and of course the external. So this is external because I'm moving externally away from the body. Internal rotation, it's the same thing. I'm doing it with the straight arm. And again, just to show you from a face forward position here, I'm bringing it across the body, right? So again, it stops at the midline here. So I'm not bringing it here because my shoulder has to move out of position, right? I'm going to start from fully extended, and I'm still focusing on that shoulder blade, kind of gliding in around the against the rib cage. So I'm still thinking about what's going on behind me, and it's here open, and here open, and so even in this position here, what I'm really attentive to is not leaning into it, not letting the shoulder come forward. I want to pull it back and down in place. Right, so I've got a really strong shoulder position here, no matter where that arm is. Of course, I feel the muscle behind me maintaining control. And we do it from top to bottom. We do it from bottom to top. And again, the range that you'll travel will only be as far as your shoulder stability will allow you. Right, so from the top to the bottom, this is all I've got. From the bottom to the top, my range can be quite a bit greater. And across the midline, I can't go any further than that. And of course, extension, I can only go so far as well. So I've got limited range on it. But again, think about what it's for, right? The design of it is really just to make sure that no matter where that shoulder joint is in space, we have some control. No matter where that hip is in space, we've got some control over it so we can actually really move. Imagine putting all your training, your deadlifts, your power cleans, your sprints, right? Your track and field type drills, your ladder drills, all those movements are now being allocated to a body that when I move, my rotator cuff is active, my extensor muscles of my spine are active, and they're all orientated right to my core. How powerful will that be for your exercise and for your practice going forward? All right. So that's my warm-up. Again, there'll be, again, there's some images here for you to look at as well, just to kind of help you orientate yourself to the exercises, but it's a really powerful thing. I really hope you put it into practice, and of course, I'd love your feedback on how this is working for you. I think it'll make a big difference in how your workouts, and of course, and anything you do beyond that will actually, will play out for you.